Hello, my name is Keith Bell, and I'd like to tell you about my Oakland Raiders experience. In 1997, while attending graduate school at San Jose State University, I did an internship for the Oakland Raiders Public Relations Department. After the internship was over, and finding out that I was the video coordinator for the Spartans Athletic Department, I was assigned to the Raiders Video Department. The Raiders facility is located in Alameda, with 3 practice fields located behind the team's office building. This is where the many activities in Raider practices took place. At the beginning of each practice, the entire team would meet on the main field for stretching exercises. The team would then separate into offensive and defensive units. The offense dressed in white with quarterbacks wearing red jerseys. I went up in a 30-foot lift to videotape many of these practice sessions. The defense, dressed in black, would practice on the field set aside for defensive drills. In late July, I went with the team as they went to their summer training camp in Napa. Napa is a beautiful place with its vineyards and hot air balloon operations. These colorful balloons took visitors high in the sky. One of these crafts even landed in a school behind the Raider training facility. It was deflated and loaded onto a truck to be returned to their facility. The Raiders' Napa training facility is located behind the Marriott Hotel, where the team and staff were housed for the duration of the camp. There is a building with several rooms for team operations. In front of these rooms is an outdoor weight area and had many free weights for the players to use during their stay. The far end of the building is where the video department set up their operations, with John Auden manning the editing duties for the team. Former players would often visit. Jim Plunkett came to practice one day as a member of the media. The great Raider quarterback led the team to 2 Super Bowl victories.
Back is Plunkett. Time to throw. Deep to the end zone to Branch. It is caught by Branch. Touchdown Raiders. Holy Toledo.
Cliff Branch also came to practice to see his former teammate and friend Fred Blitnikoff. Also showing up was former Raider center Dave Dalby. He visited with current Raider center Barrett Robbins. Dalby was the only center in Raider history to win 3 Super Bowl championships. Before practice, the team would loosen up and prepare for the day's activities. New head coach Joe Bugle would often interact with players prior to the practices. The team staff would also prepare for the day, with video coordinator Dave Nash meeting with John Auden, and many of the training staff killing time waiting for the practice to begin. Bob Romansky, the team's equipment manager, and his staff took care of all the team's equipment needs. As they did in Alameda, the team gathered on the main field for daily stretching exercises. The Raiders had acquired Jeff George, and there were high hopes for the star quarterback. The offensive linemen, coached by Keith Rowan, would work on drills using the blocking sleds, under the watchful eye of their defensive teammates. I had to check out the sleds to make sure they were working properly. The defensive linemen, coached by Bill Urbanek, would work on their pass rushing drills. The players made sure to drink plenty of water supplied for them to hydrate in the warm Napa heat. The team's defensive backfield was coached by great Willie Brown. The Hall of Famer was one of the greatest cornerbacks in league history.
And he looks and throws. Intercepted by the Oakland Raiders. Willie Brown at the 30, 40, 50. He's going all the way. Old man Willie. Touchdown Raiders.
The wide receivers were coached by another Raider legend, Fred Blitnikoff, who is also in the Hall of Fame and considered one of the best wide receivers ever to play the game.
Freddie Blitnikoff was just a great money ball player. He always seemed to play well when a lot of money on the table.
At the end of individual drills, the team would hurry to the main practice field where team activities would take place. Team owner Al Davis attended most practices. Davis was a legendary figure in NFL history. Often accompanying him was the team's general manager, Bruce Allen. Everyone moved especially quick when Mr. Davis was in attendance. Other team executives such as John Kingdon and George Karras would also attend practices. Davis was there to see the team's player development, like young running back Napoleon Kaufman. And the most important player that he came to see was free agent quarterback Jeff George. George brought to Oakland his outstanding arm. Jeff could make all the passes, precise short passes, and of course his tremendous arm could also throw the long ball. This reminded many of another Raider quarterback who wore the number 3, Darryl LaMonica, who threw many passes to Fred Biletnikoff. One of my assignments was to videotape Biletnikoff's wide receiver drills during their individual segment. Players such as Tim Brown, Desmond Howard, and newcomer Orlando Truitt were among the players that I videotaped. Young players were able to show their skills during these drills. Dropping a pass and almost running into Raider executive Ken Herrick must have been an embarrassing moment for a young wide receiver trying to make the club. Good thing he was able to redeem himself. I also videotaped special teams players such as Leo Araguz. The punter had an incredible leg and put balls high into the Napa sky. Marketing director Morris Bradshaw would bring special guests to practice, these lucky fans who were restricted to the bleachers on the sideline. Bradshaw had been a reliable receiver for the Raiders, winning 2 Super Bowl rings. Public Relations Director Mike Taylor was there for the press as they attended many practices and watched from the sideline or near a fence in the shade. Dave Nash videotaped practices 100 feet in the air. He would drop his tapes to intern Matt, who would retrieve the tapes and rush to the other camera locations. My videotaping location was 30 feet up in a lift in the end zone. I always had water, a walkie-talkie, and a towel and tape to wrap the tapes to be dropped to Matt. He would then rush the tapes to the video operations room, where John would edit the tapes to be given to coach's assistants. As camp ensued, players such as Tim Brown honed their skills. And newly acquired Jeff George worked his way into the Raider system. Defensive stars Albert Lewis and Terry McDaniel watched as young players improved each day. Running back Joe Aska, a player with one eye, proved to be a powerful back for the team. The offense was getting better with each practice, and the defensive unit was solidifying and making great plays. Players like James Trapp came off the field after working hard. Defensive and offensive players alike worked hard in the summer heat. By the end of the Napa training camp, I had made several friends, including head coach Joe Bugle, and players such as Napoleon Kaufman, Tim Brown, Derek Finner, Darrell Russell, Rob Fredrickson, Andre Bruce, and Grady Jackson, as well as longtime head equipment manager Dick Romansky, who had handed the reins to his son Bob. I helped pack our video equipment and put it on a moving van headed to Texas. The Raiders moved operations to the Dallas Cowboy training facility at St. Edward's University in Austin, Texas. I went with the team for a 10-day trip to practice versus the Cowboys. If I thought the heat was extreme in Napa, I soon found out that in Texas the heat and the humidity were much more intense. Running backs coach Bishop Harris was able to coach players like Napoleon Kaufman against the vaulted Cowboy defense. Tim Brown, Desmond Howard, and Ricky Dudley worked on their pass-catching skills. The facility had a stationary filming platform in the end zone, where I videotaped several individual drills. And at midfield, there was a 50-foot lift that I also went up in to videotape special teams activities. After each practice session was complete, Cowboy players like Herschel Walker would sign autographs for the adoring fans. Walker was an outstanding player with great size and excellent speed.
He could go all the way. Ray Claiborne, the only one that has a shot. They got no shot. 60-yard touchdown run.
The players had golf carts at their disposal. Players like Nate Newton, the Cowboys' massive offensive lineman.
That's Big Nate, right there. Boom! Where Nate just took his guy and just boom, just put him right on the ground.
And their all-pro wide receiver Michael Irvin. Irvin was one of the most demonstrative players ever to play the game. At the end of the 10-day camp, the teams held a scrimmage at the Tony Berger Stadium in Austin. Jeff George was able to show off his amazing arm with a long touchdown pass to Orlando Truitt. He also showed great elusiveness by escaping the Cowboy rush to complete a pass to Tim Hall. And running back Joe Aska made a nice run for a first down. Tim Brown got in the action, catching a down and out on the sideline. George once again showed great touch, hitting Kenny Shedd for another Raider first down. Napoleon Kaufman took a handoff and made a nice gain, escaping the grasp of a Cowboy defender. Then it was off to Irving to play the Cowboys in a real football game in the first preseason game of the year at Texas Stadium. The defense played great in the game, with players making outstanding plays.
Blitz. Oh, man.
Cornerback Lionel Washington had great position covering a wide receiver, but somehow the Cowboy made a great catch in the end zone. The Raiders' next road preseason game was played in Phoenix, Arizona. We stayed at a hotel overlooking a golf course. The game was played at Sun Devil Stadium on Frank Cush Field. The Raiders took the field for pregame activities, as did their opponent, the Arizona Cardinals. Prior to the game, I was photographed with members of the team support staff, coaching assistant Jack, and an equipment guy named Keith. I was also photographed with wide receiver Orlando Truitt. Keith got his picture taken with Cole Ford before the kicker began his pregame practice field goals. I got video staff member Jim Otten on the walkie-talkie. He was with Morris Bradshaw and had set up the video printers on the sideline for me to use during the game. The first game of the 1997 regular season was played at the Liberty Bowl in Memphis, Tennessee, to play the Tennessee Oilers. The day before the game, we checked out the stadium, and Mike Taylor was able to meet with members of NBC Sports. I was photographed with legendary Raider executive Al Locosal. During the team's glory years, Locosal was on the sideline during momentous occasions. He has been the spokesman for the Raiders and has spoke on several videos.
And so singular, it's win. Just win, baby.
On the day of the game, traveling secretary John Herrera surveyed the field. Rod Martin and his crew of trainers entered the stadium. The Oilers cheerleaders took the field. They went to the sideline where they rooted on their team. There was a large crowd at the historic stadium. One of the pregame activities was fans trying to throw a football through a giant True Value hardware nut. I was a bit apprehensive for this game, since the video printer was set up in the end zone and very close to the action. I had a great view of the field for this game. The team's next road game was in Atlanta. Once again, we arrived early, and a day before the game I was able to check out the Georgia countryside and downtown Atlanta. I went to the famous Atlanta Underground, a daiquiri bar, and a Hooters restaurant. I continued my tour of the city by going to a Quickie Picky gas station, and I saw the oldest black-owned shop in Atlanta. Then I went to the childhood home of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. I was able to stand on the same steps that the legendary civil rights leader stood on years before. Next to the house is the Martin Luther King Jr. Center for Nonviolent Social Change. This is a fantastic facility with uplifting statues, an eternal flame, and inside there were thought-provoking exhibits. And it housed some of Dr. King's awards, including the Nobel Peace Prize, that was awarded to him on October 14, 1964, and the President's Medal of Freedom that was posthumously awarded to him in 1977 and accepted by his widow Coretta Scott King. I went to the beautiful fountain behind the center. This is where Dr. Martin Luther King is interred. Next to the center is the Ebenezer Baptist Church. These two gentlemen made it possible for me to visit this historic location. They were Raider fans visiting Atlanta for the game and had rented a car. They asked me where I wanted to go in the city. I said that I wanted to go to the Ebenezer Baptist Church. Once inside the church, there was a service taking place. After the service was complete, I went to the front of the church, where I was photographed next to the altar that Dr. King gave many sermons. The game versus the Atlanta Falcons was played at the Georgia Dome. It was my first time in a dome stadium. During the pregame activities, a small blimp was flown around the indoor stadium. I was photographed with Raider legend Clem Daniels. Daniels was an outstanding running back.
And Clem Daniels takes off, shakes tacklers, almost falls, and heads for home. It's one of the neatest runs of the exhibition season.
Al Davis was dressed in white as he watched the team warm up for the game. The Atlanta cheerleaders were on hand to root on the Falcons. I had a great location on this field to perform my duties as the team's on-field video printer operator. This highly stressful position required extreme concentration. I was right behind the Raider offensive bench. The telephones used by the players to communicate with the coaches high in the press box were right in front of me. Quarterback Jeff George was in constant contact with these coaches. This was a very important game for George, since he had left the Falcons and their fans felt that he was a crybaby when he was on their team. Some of the fans even brought diapers to the game and wore them on their heads and placed them on a ledge while they yelled insults at Jeff throughout the game.
One thing probably hasn't changed, the way he'll be greeted by the fans here in Atlanta.
It won't be anything new. They didn't like me when I was here, and they obviously don't like me now. So, that's not a problem.
George played a great game.
Off by George. They pick up the blitz, and George throws it downfield. Caught. Jeff, touchdown.
His new Raider teammates showed their appreciation, and Coach Bugle was very pleased with his performance. The Raiders went on to win a close game
And celebrate his return to Atlanta.
And Jeff was a very happy man.
George pointing to the crowd that has booed him throughout the entire game.
And he is, you're right, he's doing a victory lap. He's going to all four corners of the end zone, and he's not stopping.
New York was the next road trip for the team, and I went to Times Square the day before the game. It was great to visit one of the world's most exciting cities. Manhattan is filled with cabs, and people are everywhere. The street musicians put on quite a show. Giant billboards decorate Broadway, promoting everything from athletes, hair care products, and of course, Broadway plays. The show that I attended was Bring in the Noise, Bring in the Funk. It's at the Ambassador. On game day, we went to East Rutherford, New Jersey, to the Meadowlands to play the New York Jets. The Raiders entered the stadium at one end zone to warm up, and the Jets warmed up in the opposite end zone. I was photographed on the sideline of the field. A new case had been constructed to hold the printers and was set up away from the field facing the fans. But I had to wait for former Raider linebacker Phil Villapiano's interview, which was held right next to the setup.
When I was with the Raiders, if I threw a punch, that was good, as long as it was at the right guy.
I have to battle him offline. He's hanging out of my face mask, punching me in the throat. Typical Raider.
Once the interview was complete, I was able to prepare to do my job. The stadium filled quickly. Injured player Scott Whitaker was on the sideline to watch the game. The team had a much shorter trip for the next game, Seattle, Washington, to the Kingdome. The stadium is located on the Seattle waterfront. The new stadium, CenturyLink Field, was still under construction next to the Kingdome. I helped Jim Otten by bringing his tripod to his end zone camera position where he and the Seahawks camera operator were set to videotape the game. I then went to the field, where I was photographed with fellow 37-year-old Albert Lewis. Prior to the game, the Seahawks cheerleaders practiced in the end zone. At game time, they entered the field riding in a motorized Seahawk helmet. Once again, I was right behind the Raider offensive bench. Coach Harris coached the young Napoleon Coughlin. Reserve wide receiver Orlando Truitt relaxed while waiting for his chance to enter the game. The beautiful state of North Carolina was the next destination for the team. Once again, we arrived a day early. I was able to do some sightseeing in the state where one of my great-grandfathers, Uriah Watkins, came from. I rented a car and drove to North Wilkesboro in Wilkes County, the town in which he was raised. North Wilkesboro is the largest city in Wilkes County. In 1997, there were roughly 4,000 people living in the city. I went to the town's historic courthouse, the location where Union General George Stoneman and his troops occupied during the Civil War. There was a cannon used in the Civil War there, and a plaque commemorating World War I soldiers from Wilkes County who lost their lives. Among the names on this plaque was a distant relative, Clyde Watkins. It was great to see the place where my maternal family lived. I went to the Wilkes Mall and to Wilkes Community College. The game versus the Carolina Panthers was played at Erickson Stadium, now known as Bank of America Stadium. The stadium was only 1 year old when the Raiders came to play in 1997. The Panther fans were able to enjoy nice new concession stands before the game. Al Locosal and Jim Otten killed time by the new case that housed the video printer gear that I was to use. The stadium's blue seats looked great in the North Carolina sunlight. Al Davis, dressed in white, watched the Raiders go through their pregame activities. I had my picture taken with fellow support staff Scott and Butch. The Panthers cheerleaders took the field. The beautiful ladies walked right behind me, and they took their position on the sideline prior to the beginning of the game. There was a great location for the video printers for this game. I was able to undertake my duties, taking 4 pictures of every play, making sure to write pertinent information on the prints. During the game, the cheerleaders stationed themselves to my left in front of the Panther fans. In front of me was the Raider sideline, where I saw defensive back coach Willie Brown give advice to his players. The journey to San Diego to play the Chargers at Qualcomm Stadium was the shortest away game for the Raiders. The stadium flew flags from all NFL teams, with the Raider flag between the flags from the Chiefs and the Chargers. Dave Nash's midfield filming location was high in the stands in a special filming booth. I went to the press box to make sure that the Raiders' phones were working properly. Jim Otten and Grady Jackson were on the sideline near the video printers. As usual, the Raider players entered the field to begin their pregame activities. Injured players sat on the bench, while others were stretched out by the trainers under the watchful eye of General Manager Bruce Allen and PR Director Mike Taylor. Al Davis was once again dressed in white and accompanied by his bodyguard Butch. Longtime assistant George Jones, known as Run Run, was on the sideline prior to the game versus the longtime rival Chargers. I was happy to get my picture taken with Al Locosal on the sideline of another NFL stadium. Coaching assistant Mark Ortega rushed to the field to perform his duties as head coach Joe Bugle's right-hand man. Game officials arrived to officiate the game. Once again, I had a great location to do my job, right behind the Raider bench. And I was very pleased, because right behind me, the San Diego cheerleaders rooted on the Chargers. On the trip to Denver, the Raiders played the Broncos at Mile High Stadium. I was told there was a huge light display on the outside of the stadium, so I went out to the parking lot to take a picture of it. The Raider players entered the field for the game played on Monday Night Football. Defensive players Darrell Russell and Chester McLaughlin stretched for the game, and offensive players such as tight end Ricky Dudley prepared for the game. All-Pro defensive back Terry McDaniels ready to go for the game versus the division rival Broncos. I took a picture of Coach Fred Blitnikoff catch a pass in the end zone of a stadium that he once played in as a player. A Bronco fan let it be known that we were playing in the house that Elway built. The Denver cheerleaders were dressed in Western outfits to cheer on the Broncos. The video printers were located away from the field, but I still had a great time doing my job. The last road game of the 1997 season was played on a very cold day in Kansas City. The field was covered before the game. Heaters were used to keep the field from freezing. The game was played at the historic Arrowhead Stadium. After the huge tarp was removed, the Raider players entered the field at one end zone, and the Chief players entered on the other end zone. Al Davis was dressed in black for the game, as well as the Raider personnel, while the Chiefs personnel and many of the fans were dressed in red. Coach Biletnikoff wore gloves for the game. I was photographed next to the hot seat that blew hot air into a special bench used for cold weather games. My location was right behind the Raiders bench, where Raider players anxiously waited their chance to get into the game. Lorenzo Lynch, who prepped at Oakland Tech, wisely hydrated on the sideline. I looked to my right and saw the Chiefs cheerleaders make their appearance. Once again, pretty cheerleaders ran right behind me, and this made me very happy. At home games in the Oakland Coliseum, my location was right behind the Raiders bench. It was a lot of fun to be close to the players, like Darrell Russell, who would high-five me after great plays. I really felt like part of the action when players and coaches would study the prints that I had just taken. I had a great time as the Raiders on-field video printer operator for the 1997 season. To my left, the Raiderettes rooted on the Raiders. It was great having gorgeous coworkers. All in all, it was a great experience. An experience that I will never forget.